In Walmart's Who Newville, joy started to grow. For online-only savings sure to steal the show. Tech treats and toys so dazzling and new. Walmart Cyber Monday deal soon ready for you. It's online only with very little time to spare. December 1st will soon be here, so be sure to be there. The Who's are prepared. Are you ready too? A day packed with savings. Amazing! Who knew? Subject to availability, terms and fees apply.
No one should have to choose between their own safety and their pets. But nearly half of domestic abuse survivors delay leaving because they can't bring their pets with them. Purina is helping to create more pet-friendly domestic violence shelters through the Purple Leash Project, so survivors and their pets can escape and heal together. Visit Purina.com/purple to learn more.
Welcome to Her Extraordinary Life by Design, where we celebrate women who are shaping their lives one extraordinary day at a time. I'm your host, Leslie Gaudet, self-care coach for women who are ready to make self-care a priority to support them in life and business. Every week, I'll be speaking with inspiring women from various walks of life who will share their personal journeys and will discover how they have fearlessly carved their own paths as business owners, passionately pursuing their dreams and creating a meaningful impact on their communities. So let's get started. Hello, and welcome to Extraordinary Life by Design podcast. I'm your host, Leslie Gaudet, and today we're talking with Angie Tumlinson. By 2015, Angie had reached a breaking point and a turning point. After compounding personal losses, children leaving home, working too many hours, total exhaustion, and dealing with limiting beliefs that kept her playing small her entire life, Angie felt the ache of something more, something unspoken but undeniably calling. Inevitably, the right person showed up in her life. His name was Bob Proctor, one of the most influential mindset and prosperity coaches in the world. Bob gave Angie an incredible challenge, unheard of, insane, and totally impossible, that was to turn her annual income into her monthly income. With blind faith and a bit of desperation, Angie embraced what Bob said and in 2 months did the impossible. That's when she made the life-altering decision to step into coaching, not just as a career, but as a complete redefinition of who she was and what she was here to do. After turning her annual income into her monthly income, she became one of Bob's top worldwide consultants and served for several years as a facilitator at his live events. She's now a science of the mind integration expert dedicated to inspiring personal transformation with her passion to help others make decisions from a higher spiritual perspective, leading to profound improvements in the quality of their lives. She's also recognized as a natural universal laws expert. Her deep understanding of these laws and their practical applications distinguishes her in the field, allowing her to engage with some of the most influential mindset coaches and spiritual leaders of our time. Angie, I'm really excited to have you join me today. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Leslie. I'm so delighted to be here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, when your husband reached out to me and said, my wife would be such a great addition to your show. And as we talked, we got to talk a little bit before, and I really loved your energy. And I thought, yes, you would really make such an addition to the podcast and really be able to pour into the listeners. And I'm really excited because we are going to have such a powerful conversation. That's all I can say right now. So I'm really excited to get started.
Right, me too.
Okay. Well, I want you to take us back to that season when everything felt like it was unraveling. Your career, burnout, empty nest, the inner ache for more. What shifted in you that made you say, I can't keep doing it this way? And what led you to that life-altering decision to work with Bob Proctor?
Well, it's interesting. I was one of those people that wanted to do everything right. Like I went to school, I did all the right things. I went to college, I met my husband, we got married. I grew up in the church, so, I had a lot of rules of living. And I think probably the biggest thing that struck me was in 2007 when my dad, who was 61, was killed by a train. It was an accident. And it changed the trajectory of my life in the fact that all of a sudden I saw myself and my children and my husband, and my dad was sort of the one that just always supplied this kind of support that I needed. So the ground started shaking in 2007. And then by 2012, my mother had gotten cancer. I think with just the grief of my dad. They were both really, really healthy, vibrant people. And my mother passed away at age 66. And so here, family was very important to me. So here was my mom gone and my dad gone, and then my mom gone, my other big support system. And I was really just kind of lost. My husband and I, we were pastors and we had kind of walked out of the church. We resigned from pastoring and we started a business. So by the time my mom passed away, we were in business going and with our kids. And by 2015, a big shift happened where Matt's mother, who was also like a surrogate mother to me, I was very close with my mother-in-law. I know not everybody likes her mother-in-law, but I do. I loved mine. She was like a second mother to me, and she got cancer and passed away as well. And all of a sudden, my kids were leaving home. And if I'm not a business owner, I walked out of our business after my mom died. So if I'm not a business owner and I'm not a mother and I'm not a daughter, who am I if I'm not somebody who's going to church anymore? Everything seemed to be unraveling. And I was in a network marketing company because I just was lost and I wanted community. And all of a sudden, I had great success because I watched this video of this silver-haired man talking about visualization. Didn't know his name, but I took his principle and used it, and I had great success. And then somebody in the network marketing business said to me, "Hey, I just went to this seminar and Bob Proctor was talking there." I was like, "Who's Bob Proctor?" And they showed me a video and I went, "Oh my word, that's the man." I watched his videos and he helped me. And so I looked him up and I went to an online seminar, and that was the change of everything. And my first month or so working with him, he said, "What do you want?" And I was really afraid to say what I wanted. But I had learned that when I was grieving, I didn't have any time to take off of work. Because, my husband and I started our own business. We had two storefront businesses. And if if I was working, then we were making money. But if I took off work, I didn't make money. So did I really have a business? Really, I didn't have a business. I had just created a job for myself. And this job just encompassed my life so much. And when Bob pointed that out to me, he said, "What do you really want?" And I said, "Well, I'd like to make a lot of money." And he said, "What's a lot?" And I said, "I have no idea." And he said, "Well, why don't you turn your annual income into a monthly income?" And he said it so flippantly, but it really, I remember my cheeks getting red. I got very upset because I was working, 10 to 12 hours at our business. And I just I just thought, how could I possibly put a whole year in a month? And he said, "Don't worry about the who or the how. Just what would it feel like if you did?" And I think so many of us, we get into the mechanics of it so quickly that we don't understand we're an energetic match for things. And what he helped me do was to slow down to what would it feel like? And that was the beginning of, what would it feel like if I could have that? And so I solidified the feeling. And I think this is a big mistake. People want to figure out the how. And I got into the feeling, and 2 months later, it was just effortless. Like all the doors opened up. Things just, all this stuff I already had locked up in me that wasn't being released got released. And that was the beginning of everything. And it was easy. It wasn't even difficult. And I was just thinking about this morning. I remember telling my husband this is what I was going to do. And I said, "How much money do you want me to give to our family?" And he said, "Well, if you could give me $2,500, $2,500, that would be great." So I made 50 and I gave him 2,500 and I kept the rest for myself. And I started building my business. So even though people may not believe you, you've got to believe in you. And that was the beginning of believing in myself. Yeah.
I loved your story because, well, I love the fact that you talked about the question, who am I? Because that comes up a lot, right? And especially to what I found when I was going through back in 2017, trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life, I felt like I didn't want to stay in the industry of law that I was in, like full time in that corporate position, because I felt like my life revolved around work. I didn't have a life and I was burning out. And I was actually asking the question, there's got to be more to life than this. There's got to be more, right? There's got to be more to life. Please tell me there's more to life.
Yeah.
So I love that, who am I question. But then that question that he asked you, what do you want? That's probably one of the hardest questions to answer because
Yeah.
most of the time we can say, well, I don't want this and I don't want that. And you can go through a whole list of things that you don't want for your life. But it's often that what we do want is really often hidden within what we don't want. And so I like to go back into that list. I actually did a list, took, I think it was like 8 pages of what I
Mhm.
don't want. This was a couple years ago, so that I could get that out of my head because I knew that all of what I did want was in there too, but it was being crowded. And then I love that next question, what would it feel like? Like that is so important. People don't realize it's getting into the feeling of it, like really feeling how would I how would I feel? Because especially when you think about what you'd be doing, then you start thinking like how you would be feeling. Because when you think about even going on a trip, you're going somewhere and you're excited, like you're going to be feeling amazing because you're going to a place that you want to go. So I love that you did that. And you kind of set me up for my next question because you talked about the how. And
Mhm.
again, you've been known to say that the how is irrelevant until you decide. So what does that mean for the woman who's smart, she's strategic, she's high achieving, but she's hesitating at the edge of her next level?
I honestly think that the mind is r amazing. Like, our mind is it's a fast processor, and what happens is people start figuring out the how too quickly. And the how will come when you solidify the feeling. And if you solidify the feeling, you'll overcome great, great obstacles that you may be not sure of. But when the feeling isn't solidified and the obstacle comes up, you'll pay attention to the obstacle. So this is where people don't know the difference between operating in the gain or the gap. So, for instance, I'll use this example. How many pages did you say you had? You had 8 pages of what you didn't
Mhm.
want?
That's
Yeah,
correct.
8 pages of what you didn't want, and the feeling of what you did want, because you were trying to figure out what you didn't want. But, that list is so vast, I'm surprised it only ended with 8 8 pages,
Mhm.
because most of us can write out, lots of things that we don't want, but very few people say, "What do you want?" And they wanna figure out the how too quickly. And the feeling is when he said, for me, I tell people we made 5,000 a month, but really it was just under 5,000. It was more like 4,000 a month. And this was back in 2016 when Bob asked me that. And that's the working poor. Like, that was really for in Canada, like, that would probably be around at that time, it was probably around 3,500,
Mhm.
3,800. That's not very much to raise a family of 5. It was very difficult. Now, we were really good at our businesses. We had all kinds of accolades and everything. People loved us, but we weren't able to make a living for ourselves. And it wasn't because of the business we were in, it was the way we were thinking about our business. I had grown up in the church, so I did everything with service. Money was the root of all evil. So I had a
Mhm.
big belief about that. So that was a strategy that I was using to go through life. This strategy that money is the root of all evil. All rich people are going straight to hell. You can't serve both God and money. If you ask for more, you must be selfish and you're not grateful for what you have. So, see, if I go to strategies that I use, I will never go to what I want. So I had to let all of that go and say, what would it feel like if I could turn my annual income? I could not go into how I was going to do it. I had to go into the feeling. And I stayed in the feeling. I read my story every day for 2 months. And what happened was the infinite brought an idea. It was always there. The idea was always there. People are successful at this, but I was not attuned to it. And you have to learn to attune to yourself or attune to the idea. See, people want to atone for the idea. Atone means paying for it, means making it right. But attuning means you join it. And so I was trying to stay, if most people try and stay themselves and join an idea and they can't join it because they're grounded in their old belief system. And what I did is that I let go of my old belief system. I wasn't smart at the time when it was happening. I just did what he told me to do. Bob said, don't figure out the how, just what would it feel like? And so I attuned myself to it. He got past my smarty pants brain of trying to figure it out. And I just felt into it. And when I felt into it, an idea came that resonated and I went, oh, I could do that. And that lit up. I already had all those skills, all those abilities, but I was using them in the wrong order. And as soon as I attuned to it, the order showed up. And it was effortless. And it was like, have you ever had this thing where it's like all the doors open up and you're like, how did that happen? Well, that's how it happens is you learn to attune for it. I couldn't make up for stuff. I couldn't atone for it. I just had to attune. And I don't think people know the difference between working in the gap of something, of what you can't do or I don't want to do, to the gain of what you want to do. What would it feel like if? And so when that happens, I've seen it over and over in myself and in my clients, is learning to attune yourself to the idea. And the universe is really friendly to our ideas. All of a sudden, doors just open up and it's easy to walk through it. When the conscious and the subconscious mind come together is where effortless action takes place. But people don't spend this time, or I don't want to say spend time, people don't attune to this idea first. They want to get busy, 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 doing, do, go, 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 go. And it's exhausting. It is so exhausting. And so to learn to just slow down, to speed up, it's the best gift I ever gave myself was to spend those 2 months or give myself those 2 months of reading what it would feel like every day and getting in the feeling as many times as I could. And then presto, I knew what to do. I knew what to do. Yeah.
I love that because, and explaining like the difference between leaning towards the gap or the gain. It's so true though. Like as I was saying, the reason why I focused on what I didn't want, because I knew that would be the easy list for me to write out. And I write small, so it was a pretty lengthy list for 8 pages, but it was so liberating. And what I found very liberating for myself was just to actually look at the list once, and I've never looked back. I've never looked at the list again because to me those things are irrelevant. They are not important. What
Mhm.
I see what I want ahead for me. But that wasn't always the case. Like if you had asked me back, 10 years ago if I loved self-development, if I would be kind of like, I guess, a self-development junkie, like really wanting to learn about how, our mind works and how our thoughts work and our emotions and all of that, I would have told you, no way, you're crazy, because that was just so far off the radar for me. And so I really started to learn how important mindset is. Such a buzzword, but it's really just about, again, if you go deeper and really learn about like what it means to be really paying attention, becoming attuned, like you were saying, to what you want based on how you're thinking, you're feeling. But getting into that feeling part, like I really feel that's so important, is to get into the feeling of like, what do I truly want that to be like for me? So that experience. And so I love that he gave you that challenge. I think it's incredible and great for you to be able to like take that challenge on and be able to really execute at it and to make it
Yeah.
your reality. a lot of people might think that that is really unattainable. And that's just because we live in a world, I think, and I'm not sure, what your opinion is on that, but I feel like when we were kids, our parents, and even if we became parents with our own children, there was always that saying, like, oh, dream big. What do you want? Like, dream big. There's nothing off limits to that. And then somewhere along the line, things started changing and the world started telling us that, no, you can't have that. No, that's too big of a dream. That's completely crazy. As an example, my brother, his oldest son is in a band and he is such a heart centered, loving, kind, grounded, down to earth young man. If his parents had said to him, no, get with reality, you can't be a musician, and, told him, like, don't follow your dream, then people wouldn't get to have, his voice out there. Him and his bandmate, there's just the two of them, but they're so incredibly talented, down to earth, very much, just that nice, soft, kind, compassionate, empathetic, graceful, this really, really cool young men. I'm proud to call them family. And so it's just like, again, that the whole thing around the dream. So I wanted to talk about the natural universal laws because this is something that you're known for. First of all, what does it mean? And then secondly, for women in business who are either growing their business, starting a business, maybe they're incorporated and have a side hustle, what would you say for the woman who's never even considered them? How do these laws actually quietly shape her results, even if she's unaware?
Yeah, such a great question. You know, I was thinking about this until I met Bob. I had never had anybody challenge me. Like as you were saying that and being challenged about what I was capable of doing, he believed in me. He said he told me that it is your God-given right to have anything you want. What is it that you want? But I will tell you, I would say it took me a good 2 to 3 months of writing down every day, what do I want? So I already had a belief that I couldn't have what I wanted. And I didn't realize that I was sending that out. And it wasn't until he said, "What do you want?" Like when he asked me, and I said, I'd like to make a lot of money. I mean, I'd written all the things. You know what? As you were saying that, I was thought, man, I probably did write a letter. I probably really did write a list of all the things I didn't want to do. I didn't want to work hard anymore. I was working so hard. And this is where the laws is going to come into play because there's 7 natural laws. People always ask me, what's the difference between 7 natural laws, 12 universal laws? What's all that? Listen, the 7 natural laws are the first time I was introduced to them, Bob called them God's modus operandi. Well, I was like, what is that? And I had to learn. I was 49 when I started studying really what are the natural laws. And I grew up in the church, and so the law of attraction, I remember when that came out, I didn't even watch The Secret. I thought it was like evil and bad and wrong, and like I was told that's new age, and I had a lot of really big beliefs, and I didn't even watch The Secret till probably maybe 4 or 5 years ago. Never watched it. And so the only reason that I listened to Bob, I'm just gonna be perfectly honest, is because he looked like an elder at church. To be honest, that's the only way he got past my paradigm, my habit of believing in somebody speaking the truth was because he physically looked like a man of religion. And as I started listening to him, a lot of things resonated. Now, the reason it resonated is because he was speaking about natural laws. And growing up in the church and studying the Bible, the natural laws are written all over it. But the story doesn't matter. It's the use of it is what's important. So the laws really helped me get past my paradigms And a paradigm is just a multitude of habits and behaviors. It's a mental program that we have grown up with. And, this natural program runs the show all the time. And it wasn't until I was introduced to the one law in particular called the law of polarity. And Bob was saying to me, and as I studied more and more, that for every single thing, there is an opposite. And at first I was like, I don't know about that. But every time I challenged it, it was really true. There was an opposite to everything. If there's an in, there must be an out. If there's an up, there must be a down. If there's just everything has hot and cold, there's an opposite to everything. And so in this law, I began to say, okay, if I think this way, what would happen if I thought differently? Because this way has gotten me to a certain level where I don't like what I'm doing. So I remember after reading it, the law of opposites, you have to start out with it just is. There is no meaning behind this until I put meaning. My habit of meaning is this. What would happen if I just thought differently about it? So I remember almost making up a little dance for myself as I did things. I would have these feelings about things, like let's say I was in a grocery store and I thought the price of something was too much. And I would start getting all judgy about it and, oh, woe is me. And I would go into victimhood. And all of a sudden I would say, wait a minute, it just is. There is no meaning about this till I put meaning. So if I see it over here as too expensive, no more effort is required for me to imagine that this is the right price. And so I just started practicing this. I practiced it with my husband. I practiced it with my kids. Habits that I had at looking at my children and habits that I had at looking at my husband, he's doing that on purpose. He's this, he's doing that. And I would say, what would happen if I believed he wasn't doing it on purpose? And as soon as I started entertaining another story, I started seeing it from another perspective. And I started using the laws to break my paradigms. So the natural law of polarity was just one. The next one that I really started implementing was the law of perpetual transmutation, which is any thought that I have, I perpetuate that to the next and the next and the next and the next idea. So I started saying, well, what would happen if I changed this idea and I now started perpetuating out another concept? And so I started really understanding that I became a lighthouse of sending out vibrations in the world. And as I started sending out the vibrations in the world, I started learning about the law of cause and effect. If I send this law out, it's going to come back to me. Like thoughts attract like ideas. And so I started realizing that the way I thought was going to bring about what I wanted to see in the world. If I were to ask you, I think I did ask you this when we were talking before, but do you see the color red anywhere in your room?
Yeah, a couple
Yeah.
places.
Yeah. Were you thinking about red before I said red?
Not at all.
But red was always in the room. Red was always there. It wasn't until you got involved in the idea did you notice red in the room. So everything that you want is already here. But if you're looking for something different, you're never going to see it. So I had to learn, what does success look like? What does abundance look like for me? What does opulence and opportunity look like? And if I didn't know the feeling of it, I wasn't going to see it. So I had to start training myself to see it. And if I saw something that there wasn't opportunity there, I would say, no more effort is required for me to see this as opportunity. Or if I had something that I failed at, I would say, no more effort is required for me to see this as a success. Failure is the beginning of success. Did you know? I mean, I never adopted that idea until I started studying success principles, that failure actually takes you away from the direction you're going and helps you move to the opposite direction. So I started seeing how I could utilize this in my everyday thought. And I started writing out the 7 natural laws. Every day I would write out just the titles of them. And whenever I read or whenever I had a problem, I would try and utilize the law to get me to think differently about it. And I just did it often enough, just every day, that all of a sudden my life started just changing faster and faster and faster. But it was a spiritual practice I had to do. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I really truly believe that again, they say thoughts become things, but I truly believe that, what we think about is really what we bring in. So if you're always negative, of course, there's going to be more things mirrored back to you that are negative because that's all you're focusing on. It's the same thing for being positive. It's not about toxic positivity. I know there's a lot of people that worry about having to be positive all the time. This is not about saying that you can't have your emotions and be in those down times, but I truly believe that what you focus on is really what's going to come back to you. And I think, what you said is that you started realizing that if I wanted these things, not only did I want to know what that would look like, but I had to actually understand how it would feel so that I could actually see it, visualize it much more clearly. And I think that's important. One of the things I know that transformation again for you begins in the thought part first, not just the action. Like action, of course, is important. So can you walk us through how this plays out in real life, especially when someone is exhausted and tempted to hustle their way forward? Maybe
Yeah.
even giving a client example to anchor that in, because I know, again, I've talked to a lot of women some of them are really super successful. Some of them have reached out to me about the podcast and have told me, I just listened to this episode or your episode, like my solo episode, and I felt like you were talking directly to me because I do those things and I'm not even recognizing that I'm still, doing that, pressing into pushing through that hustle mentality. So yeah, if you could maybe give us an example of a client that you worked with to help them, how that works?
Yeah, I wanted to clarify something. We live on 3 planes simultaneously. We live on the spiritual plane, which is our imagination, which, is, in the ether. This for me, this sounded kinda out there when I first started, but in the ether is energy all the time, and energy is always vibrating and is on frequencies. And so what I started realizing is I don't have thoughts, I join thoughts. So we don't have thoughts, we join them. There's infinite frequencies and vibrations. And notice how many times, like an ad or somebody's idea comes, and all of a sudden you got an opinion about it because you've joined a thought, you've joined an idea. And we're stimulated by outside things. And those outside things have control over us. But we also have an inner person inside of us, this imaginative idea. And if we get real quiet, we can listen to her. And so we live on the spiritual plane and then we live on the intellectual plane. This is where our education is, our reasoning faculties, all of this is there. And then we live on the physical. Now, most people operate on the intellectual, somebody else's idea, and then bring it into form. And this is where the hustle and the grind come from. Because we're not aware that in the spiritual world, we were taught to hustle and grind. So we start out with that, and then we use reasoning with that, and then we bring it into physical form. This is why people get so exhausted. And so what Bob said is in your imagination, because my dad was a logger and he taught me you have to work really hard for your money. Our dads probably knew one another. And 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 so he said, "Well, what would happen if you didn't have to work hard for your money?" And I said, "Oh, Bob, that's not how it works." And he says, "But what would happen if it were true?" And so I thought, "Okay, I'll play your silly game. I will say that it will be easy." So I started out perpetuating in the spiritual idea that it would be easy. And then I started seeing in my intellect how I could make things easier. And then I started executing them easy. What happens is people try and change the 3D of the hustle, the grind, the job. They try and change that, and they try and do it with their intellect. And this is where we get burnt out. And what we want to do is we want to create it from within so that the flow will happen intellectually and then physically. When you try and do it the opposite way, you're going upstream. This is where people get exhausted. So everything that you're involved in right now is a great teacher to help you use the perpetual law of transmutation by understanding the opposite of it. So if I believe I have to grind and work hard, and people say, well, I don't want that. And I'll say, but it's a habit for you to do it. If you want to change the habit, you have to start out with a different feeling first, of a relaxed feeling. Now, it takes effort. I don't think people understand what effort looks like. And I will tell you, I've spent more time learning to effortlessly, if I could say that. I've learned to be in the spiritual part first and attune myself to it. And people want to make up for it. They want to atone themselves. I'm going to work really hard so I don't have to work hard. You hear this concept, and that's a paradigm. What would happen if you could go to the front of the line and just say, no, I'm now going to work at ease. I'm now going to not react to things. I'm going to learn to respond with my new identity. And I think this is where Bob taught me, people will say, yeah, I know Bob Proctor. I will hear people say that, and I'll say, so what do you think about the stick person? And they'll say, what do you mean the stick person? And I'll say, then you don't know Bob. You may know of Bob, but you don't know Bob's philosophy, because Bob always taught an idea that he was taught called the stick figure. So the stick person is simply just, it really is, the top of it is a circle, and then the bottom is the body, and the top part is divided into two parts, the conscious and the subconscious mind. And it's the use of the conscious and the subconscious mind that is really where our God-given piece is to create what we want from the infinite. So when we learn to direct our thought and we learn to feel our thought, and I'm not talking about intellectually feel it, but really our whole body feel it, then we become that beacon to attract it back. And people want to do it with just their intellect. And the feeling is the secret. And people don't know the difference between feeling it intellectually or your whole body's vibrating with it. So this is where meditation and contemplation are very important, to be still and feel it before it arrives. Just like the color red, when I told you about red, you were already vibrating on that frequency. You already have that frequency within you. So when I said red, you just went to the frequency of it, and then everything that's red appears. We don't know this is how the mind works, but this is how it works. So if you don't have what luxury or opulence or ease or flow is, then you're going to keep doing what you were taught, which for most of us is work hard, grind it out, and you got to work hard for it to come. What happens if you didn't have to work hard for it? Yeah. I learned to just learn to live in the spiritual, the intellect, and the physical. Now, one thing that Bob helped me with is I was always living in the rainbow hearts and unicorn farts land, and I could not make things happen for me in the physical. And I was working really hard on the physical, and he helped me to change my spiritual thought, and then the physical would follow. And that's how it happened for me.
Yeah, I love that. One of the things I want to ask you as a follow-up. So I know that, as we talked about, you were able to really create that income that, that beautifully bold challenge for you to take. You wanted a lot of money. Well, what does that look like? And you said, I don't know. Well, why don't you change your annual into your monthly, and which is like a huge goal. And some might again feel like that's impossible for them, that maybe you had a special edge or something like that. But if I was to ask you, what did you have to believe about yourself, about possibility to actually make that leap and trust that you were going to land? Instead, what would someone out there really need to believe about themselves that it is possible? Because it's hard out there in this, and especially online, you see all of the pictures and the
Oh,
videos,
yeah.
and people are looking successful, and you don't get to see the behind the scenes that someone might have popped up and you think it's overnight success, but it could have taken them years to get to where they are. So, what would someone have to believe about themselves and about that possibility to actually make the leap and trust that they're going to land?
Everything that you need is already within you. The only thing that's missing is your belief. Faith is a free gift. We were given faith as a free gift, and we don't need to do anything for our faith. But wherever your belief is, your faith grows. And most people don't believe it's within them, but what would happen if you did? Every person that I've ever seen that has done well stops believing that it's not in them. Because what happens is, especially when people hear my story and they say, well, you were overnight success. No, I was 49 years old, had owned a restaurant and a business, two businesses for, over 10 plus years. And before that, I was a pastor of a church. Before that, I was raising kids. Before that, I went to college. Like there were many, many things that I didn't see as gifts that I learned along the way. There's gifts within you that you've learned along the way, but you haven't put them in an order yet. One of the first lessons I think I ever learned in personal development is order is heaven's first law. To live in a heavenly state, you've got to be in an orderly state. We already have the order in us. It's just out of order. And when you really start rearranging it, it just clicks, it snaps right in it perfectly. So for instance, I became a coach for Bob. I didn't know I was gonna do that. In fact, I fought it. I was like, "Who am I to be a coach?" My degree in school was music. What does music have to do with coaching? Well, I had been coached in music a lot, and I had also, led choirs and bands and everything. So there was a part of me that already understood about leading thought, but I never saw myself as a coach. I was a worship leader. And so I led singing, at church with big, bands and stuff like that. And all of a sudden, I had developed those skills over time from the time I was a really young child. So what I did is I just took all those skills that I had and I just reimagined them as a coach. The thing is that we have great reservoirs of talent that we've developed over years, but we don't look at it or recognize it as talent because we have been dismissive of it or other people have dismissed us, and we don't see those are our greatest assets, our greatest treasures. They shined too brightly at one time and somebody criticized it, and we packed it up and put it in the closet. And this is where you want to take those gifts out, unwrap them, and let them shine. And especially growing up, I'm 58 right now, and I have lots of skills and lots of abilities that as I was growing up, I was told they weren't good. And so I shoved them in the closet. And I said, yeah, I'll never let those out. I was embarrassed. I did it wrong. I got feedback. I didn't know what to do with the feedback. So I locked it up. Instead of taking the feedback and perfecting it, I just locked it away. Most of us have been criticized and we've locked it all up. You got to bring those out and you got to explore those and get good with the feedback. The
Yeah.
feedback is our greatest. It condenses time frames when you can take the feedback and not react to it, but be in gratitude of saying, oh, thank you for the feedback.
Mhm.
This comes from another natural law, the law of gestation, which we call the law of gender. And the law of gender is not about male and female, not about, you know, male and female, but masculine, feminine. And masculine, feminine is like we'll use sperm and the egg. The sperm is always going, going, and going, move, 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 go, 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 go. But the egg is still and it receives. It's in receivership. And most people who are really giving, good givers, you and I think we've recognized we've been really good givers. And so we give, 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 give. And when you're somebody who's been giving, you're in masculine energy. You've got to equally be good at receiving. So I had to learn to be good at receiving back for what I was giving. Everyone wants to receive their goal, but they're not in the habit of receivership. And sometimes receivership can be painful. It can be painful because it's feedback, and we don't know what to do with the feedback because that's a fail. But fail is the beginning of success. And when you learn to see that and you learn to apply the law of polarity, you start being grateful and you go, oh, you have been a great teacher for me. Thank you for showing me that. And you get into gratitude rather than beating yourself up. We're just good at beating ourselves up. We're just
Right.
really good at it. I hope that answered your question. I don't know.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you so very much. Angie, it has been so amazing having you here. I just feel like my energy is buzzing being around you. I love your story, the season that brought you to from just where you were in that state where a lot of people find themselves, asking the question like, who am I? Is there more to life than this? And it brought you to almost like to your knees almost with a decision that completely changed your life. So I really loved hearing how you've used your experience to help your clients, helping others shift from that exhaustion and doubt to the fear to, or I should say, not so much shifting from the fear, but actually like maybe going into the fear and seeing like, what is that? Because again, the thought around it is not like you were saying, the fail is not the end of it. It only becomes the end if you don't do anything with what you've learned. So I really, really love that. And that you teach from what you live. I'm just so excited that we are connected. So thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
And to our listeners, if you'd like to connect with Angie directly or learn more about her work as a science of the mind integration expert, you can find her contact information in the show notes. Remember, you don't have to wait until the circumstances are perfect to say yes to what's next. Clarity often comes after the commitment, not before. And sometimes the most powerful decision you can make today is to trust what's already stirring inside you, even if it doesn't make complete sense yet. That quiet nudge, that inner knowing, it's not random. It's the beginning of something meant for you. Until next time, keep dreaming, keep believing, and keep designing your extraordinary life one day at a time. Thank you for joining me on Her Extraordinary Life by Design. I hope you've been inspired and empowered by the incredible stories shared on this show. If you enjoyed this episode and the conversations we've had, I would greatly appreciate if you could take a moment to leave a review. Your feedback and support mean the world to me, and it will help others discover the podcast and join our empowering community. Remember to hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Together, we can continue to learn from these amazing women, uncover their extraordinary journeys, and be motivated to create our own lives by design. Thank you again for tuning in. Until next time, stay empowered and keep shaping your extraordinary life one day at a time.
Ever thought about starting your own podcast?
Do you have a business or a message you want to share with the world?
Well, now it's easier than ever with Electricast. Hi, I'm Mark Netter.
And I'm Peter Rafelson. We're the founders of Electricast Media.
Whether you want to start a new podcast or already have one, join Electricast to grow your audience, monetize your content, and build your community.
With our simple sign-up, you get free promotion, world-class analytics, premium ads, and personal support.
Go to electricast.com and join our community today.
Electricast. Transform your influence.
Electricast.
You deserve better healthcare, and so do we all. Medicine in America is a podcast that shares real stories of patients and doctors reshaping the future, because the revolution in care isn't coming, it's already here. Real stories, real change, a better future for healthcare.
Electricast. Electricast.